Welcome to another video in the Visual COBOL in a Nutshell series. In this video, we'll look at the steps required to install the Micro Focus products that support development, debugging, and execution of COBOL applications that will run in a Docker container on Windows. We'll explore prerequisites and background for installing these 4 Docker products. We'll look at an example installation profile to better understand where these products fit in with other Micro Focus products. We'll cover the steps to download the product. Finally, we'll look at the steps to install and license the product. For development environments, the information in this video assumes that you already have the Visual COBOL for Eclipse or Visual COBOL for Visual Studio product installed and licensed on the developer's workstation. You can find background information about installing and licensing the above products, as well as details about their use, in a YouTube playlist named Visual COBOL for Eclipse in a Nutshell or Visual COBOL for Visual Studio in a Nutshell. The information shown here requires that the appropriate Docker or other container product has been installed. For information about requirements for installing the Docker products, for Windows, you can see this link on the Docker website. Finally, the information in this video relates to Visual COBOL 6.0. Some of the features shown are new in that version, so you may not find them in earlier products. A quick note about which Micro Focus product provides container support in which scenario. To support development work with Docker, the Visual COBOL Build Tools for Docker product is required on Windows. If you are running your application within Docker containers for any usage beyond the developer testing their code, for example, for UAT, QA, or production usage, then the COBOL Server for Docker product is required. Let's take a quick look at an example installation profile for a developer who is using one of the Visual COBOL IDEs in conjunction with containers. The example shown here assumes that the developer uses a Windows workstation and will be working with Docker containers on Windows. First, the Visual COBOL product for your preferred IDE must be installed on the developer workstation. Second, the appropriate Docker product should be installed on the workstation. The example in this video is on Windows 10, where the features shown require Docker Desktop, sometimes called Docker Community Edition for Windows. Please see the Visual COBOL documentation for information about the required Docker edition for other operating systems, versions, and platforms. In addition, building or debugging COBOL applications inside a container requires that the Docker-specific Visual COBOL product is installed into the Docker environment. On Windows, this product is Visual COBOL Build Tools for Docker. For those familiar with the remote development feature in Visual COBOL for Eclipse, Build Tools for Docker is somewhat similar to the Visual COBOL Development Hub product, which supports developing applications remotely from the Eclipse IDE on Unix/Linux platforms. In this case, Visual COBOL Build Tools is installed as a Docker image and will run remotely from the IDE inside a Docker container. With this setup, COBOL programs can be developed in the IDE and initially debugged locally on the developer's workstation. The same application executables can then be deployed into a Docker container, or these can be rebuilt inside the container. Using the IDE, the developer can also debug the application running remotely inside the container. To obtain the Visual COBOL for Docker's products, you may receive a link as part of a product delivery email from Micro Focus. An alternate way to obtain it, or to receive updated versions, is to use the Downloads link on the Micro Focus Software License and Downloads, or SLD, site. On the Downloads page, choose the Visual COBOL product for your preferred IDE. In this example, Visual COBOL for Eclipse. Then select the appropriate product name and version. In the resulting table, look for Docker support for Visual COBOL for your version. Click the download link to obtain the zip file with the installer. The file name will be similar to the one shown here. In order to use this product, you will need a separate license for it. The license for these Visual COBOL for Docker products is provided as a .mflic file. This can be obtained on the activations page on the SLD site. The process for installing and licensing these for Docker products is different than for other Micro Focus COBOL products. First, there are a few prerequisites to address before installing. On Windows 10, Hyper-V virtualization support must be enabled. As mentioned before, the appropriate Windows Docker product must be installed. On Windows, the Docker installation by default may be configured to build and use Linux containers. If this is the case, you'll need to change Docker to instead use Windows containers. This can be done by right-clicking on the Docker icon in the system tray and then choosing the option Switch to Windows Containers as shown here. The installation of build tools for Docker will require about 32 gig free on disk after the above Docker product has been installed. Now for those installation steps. First, unzip the provided product.zip file into an empty directory. This will create several subdirectories. See the README documents in each directory for a description of that directory's contents, links to additional information, background about Docker, and more. Open a Windows command prompt with administrator privileges and cd to the VC Build Tools directory. This product is also licensed differently than other Micro Focus products. You must provide a license before launching the installer by copying the license file into the VC Build Tools directory. The license is installed automatically during the product installation. Run the installer batch file named build.bat, indicating your acceptance of the Micro Focus End User License Agreement by specifying the I accept EULA option. The installation will download some additional required components and may take several hours. Progress messages will be displayed as the installation proceeds. The installer creates several Docker images. The README docs provide background information about the various images. When the install completes, a list of the created Docker images is displayed. That concludes this video on installing the Visual COBOL for Docker products. Please see additional videos in this series for information about how to develop, debug, and deploy COBOL applications that work with containers. Thanks for watching.